Alright, let's talk about probably the greatest tool ever made for sharpening chain, which is a big claim, but once you know how to use one, they're extremely helpful. So these are a basic depth gauge tool made by Stihl. They're a $10 piece of pressed steel. There is nothing really fancy about it, and it does not matter how you sharpen a chain. You could be a freehand round filer, you can use a file holder like that, the little Husqvarna roller gauges, you could even be a square filer. It does not matter. This little tool, this cheap thing, will make a bigger difference to your sharpening than just about anything else. So when we're talking about sharpening a cutter, there's three angles that we are concerned with. So when we start off, I describe this as the filing angle, just so it's slightly less confusing. That's looking at the tooth from the top. This is the one most people know about. This is pretty much the only one a lot of people care about. So we'll just start off with that. Think, okay, there's a witness mark on it, it's marked at 30 degrees, I filed my chain at 30 degrees, so it must be sharp. The difficult thing, and where most people come unstuck when they're trying to file with just a round file, is file height control. Getting the height of this correct in the tooth is absolutely critical. It is the difference between a chain that will cut and one that won't. You can have that 25, 30 degrees, whatever you're aiming for, across the top. If this isn't right, it won't cut wood. So, that's the filing angle on the top. The next angle we deal with when sharpening chain is side plate angle. Side plate angle is viewed on the cutter from the outside. So the tooth facing towards you, sitting like that, however you want to describe it, the back of the cutter. When we measure side plate angle, we're only concerned with the very upper part. It's only a very small amount. In metric, maybe a millimetre, millimetre and a half, depending on the chain type. It might go down to 2 mils. The reason we're only really concerned about that top bit, when a cutter enters the wood, we've got the depth gauge at the front. The depth gauge limits the depth that the tooth can cut. So it can only pull itself into the wood so far. So the only part of this chain that actually cuts is from about 1.5 to 2 millimeters down the side here on up. So that's the side plate angle. It's pretty important. A lot of people refer to it as hook, and a lot of people believe to create a very fast cutting chain, you want lots of hook, which is just a mistake. The side plate's job is to sever the wood fibers on the side. It is the hardest job a chain has to do. It takes the most power. That corner takes the most abuse. You really don't want to limit the amount of support or strength that it has behind it. Chains do not require hook to cut. You can have a 90-degree side plate and it will still cut. Pretty much the best cutting chain you can get is square, and when we file square, we have about 85 degrees of side plate angle. The next angle after that is our top plate cutting angle. It's viewed from the inside of the cutter. We look in, and it's the angle that's formed across the face of the top plate. It is hard to see. It is the hardest one to see. So that top plate cutting angle is the most important angle in all of this chain sharpening, because a all saw chain is based on the old chipper principle. It chips wood. The top plate is effectively working like a wood plane. The corner goes up into the wood. The side plate severs that side fibre, and the chip is planed out by the top plate cutting angle. Alright, so now we know the angles, and we know what we're trying to achieve. When you go to sharpen a chain, some manufacturers will list this information on the box, or some of this information on the box. The chain in here is a Husqvarna S85. I'm using it because it's shiny and new. On the back of the box, it gives us some basics. It tells us our 30-degree filing angle, and it's indicating 60 degrees. The way it's indicated on there, it's pretty much showing us top plate, the side plate angle. It wants a 60-degree side plate angle. Most chains now are recommended to file at with the file at 90 degrees, so it's in there flat. So whatever side plate angle you get is the top plate angle you're going to end up with as well, because you're holding it flat. If you go in there, you hold it flat at the correct height, you'll get a 60-degree side plate cutting angle and a 60-degree top plate cutting angle. Alright, so now we know the basics of the three angles that we need to create when we're sharpening a chain. The question is, how can we be sure we've got them? I've heard some weird theories. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. A lot of people who definitely claim they're good at this do it in some strange ways. I don't know if it works for them. Some people will just look at it. Some people run their finger on it. I've heard crap that it has to be able to cut your fingernail or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how you can tell an angle by doing that, but whatever. That's where this crappy little tool comes in. $10, press Stihl. Pretty rubbish at its actual job of being a depth gauge. We won't get into that, but whatever. These are manufactured by Stihl. There is other versions of these, but this is the only one I've seen with all the angles in it. What makes these very good is, across the top here, we've got a couple of angles listed. There's 30 degrees, 10 and 35. So, if we take our chain, we take a few swipes at it with a file, you know, you get in there and you do what you got to do. How do we know we've got 30 degrees when we're done? How do we know we've met that manufacturer's requirement? Well, a lot of chains have a witness mark on the top plate. Quite a few have them on the side plate as well. It can give you a rough guide. This little tool will tell you much better, more accurate. All we've got to do is drop it down on top. We've got our 30-degree mark. I'll include pictures of this so it makes it better. Drop it down, line it up. Have we got 30 degrees? Yes or no? If you do, great. If you don't, well, you might have to work on it. Maybe if you're only a little bit out here or there, who cares? So we've got the correct filing angle across the top. Next thing we want to check, what's our side plate angle? Have we achieved a good side plate angle? Could be whatever's listed in your specs that you're going for. Stihl used to give out little paper charts. Oregon, as best as I can see, gives out nothing on the box as far as information. Should be noted as well, Oregon EXL chain, they specify a 25-degree sharpening angle across the top, but the witness marks that are marked on the top of the cutter are at 30 degrees. Alright, so side plate. We want to make sure we've got whatever we're aiming for. If our intention was to sharpen with a 60-degree side plate, we can use the small windows that are in the side of this tool to check that. All we have to do, you might have to turn it around so it's facing the right way, drop it over the top, line up the corresponding small window with the cutter, have a look through the side. It takes a fair bit of light. It is easier to do outside. If not, just have a good light with you so you can see in there. Move it back and check. Is it 60 degrees? Maybe this one, there's two different versions of this that are marked with different amounts, which appears to be depending on the age of when it was made. So at the end here we've got 85 if you're square filing or doing semi-chisel or doing something a bit different with a full chisel chain. Very helpful. This bottom one's got 75 marked on it. The top one has 70. So they've changed throughout the years. Doesn't really matter. The rest are universal. We've got a 60 degree line, the 70 degree line, a 60 degree, a 90 and an 80 degree line on the side. So we can check, you know, you drop it down, you have a look. If you're aiming for 60 degrees and you put it on there, if it's greater than that, then you've held the file too low. If it's less than that, then the file's been lifted up. That may be something you're aiming for. It's definitely something I do quite regularly. But it's good to be able to use the tool to actually check your work. Make sure whenever you're doing it, know what you want to achieve and check that you have achieved it. You don't have to check every tooth, but go around, pick a few at random, check your work. Alright, so if you've checked your filing angle and your side plate angle, both of them are good. The next thing you want to do is go from the inside of the tooth, line it up, again, these markings on the side, drop it down, have it so you can just see that top plate, the edge of the top plate cutting angle. When we're looking at that, when we're measuring it, we're looking at it from the very inside across this face. It's very small, it's hard to see. It takes a fair bit of light to be able to see in there. But drop it down, check it, make sure it's right. It is the most critical angle. If you can maintain that 60 degrees there, the 60, 70 degrees there, depending on how bad the wood is you're cutting, it will still cut. It'll cut well. If you can get it down to around 50 degrees, it will generally cut faster. But that's when we get into different types of sharpening. Alright, different types of sharpening and when you might want to go outside the manufacturer's recommendation. I live in Australia. All our native woods are hardwoods. A lot of them are very hard. If you're cutting extremely hard wood, once it's old and it's dried out, it really punishes chain. Generally, for doing a lot of bigger stuff, I will go to a 404 chain, just due to the extra cutter size and strength. But it's not really a viable option on a lot of saws. Maybe you're cutting softwood. Maybe you're going for outright cutting speed. Maybe you just want more durability. There are a lot of reasons to change the angles from the manufacturer's recommendation to something else. It takes a bit of trial and error to see what works for you. I can give some rough guides, but you're going to have to try for yourself. Alright, what I would change. I'll run this until it needs sharpening. I will probably not make dramatic changes straight away. What I would like to see different on this chain and what experience has told me will cut faster for me in the wood I'm using with the saws I generally run, which typically are larger. I want less side plate angle. I want to keep that top plate cutting angle around 60. I'll take 55 or 50 if I can get it, but I'm happy with 60. I want to reduce that side plate angle. I want that somewhere in the 75 to 85 range. I would take 90 degrees if I could get it, but I don't think it is possible with this chain. How do we do that? First thing, this recommends a 5.5 or 7/32 file, and it recommends filing it flat, 90 degrees across. What I would do, I would keep that size file initially, and all I would change is I would go from filing flat to dropping the handle down to 10 degrees. What happens when we do that is it drops the file lower through the inside, so it increases that top plate cutting angle, but it raises the file on the outside of the side plate. I would just sharpen it like that initially and see what happens. I would say we're going to end up in that 75 degree side plate with a 60-ish degree top plate cutting angle. Your next step from there, if you're trying to create something that's a bit different, you can go down to file size. Go to a 5.2mm file, do the same thing, drop the file down, give it a go. What will happen with the smaller diameter file, you'll find to keep a reasonable, you'll be able to keep a 60 degree top plate cutting angle while raising the file up. That'll take even more out of the side plate, might get you up into the 80s. It might be worth it, might not. I don't really know on this chain at this stage because I don't have experience with it. So to sum it all up, buy one of these cheap tools, keep it around, As far as setting depth gauges with it, they do work for about the first half of the chain. After that, it's a bit average. They do make two different versions. The bigger one's for 404.5 inch chain. It has pretty much the same windows. It does the same job. Just got more depth on the depth gauge tool. Instead of 0.8 mil or 30 thou instead of 0.65 or 25 on the one for the smaller chains. Could actually be a third version for 1/4 inch. I don't use quarter, so I don't know. If you do want to use this tool to do your depth gauges, if you're running a 325 or a 3/8 chain, or even a 3/8 low profile chain, start with the 0.65 mil one. Once you're about halfway back, swap to the 404. Take that deeper depth gauge. It's required as a chain works its way further back. I'm not going to go into detail on that one. There's plenty of decent videos out there explaining the requirements there. What else can these little depth gauge tools do for you? Well, the obvious one is the pointed end clears out your bar. So you can just put it in the bar groove, sweep down, clears it out. You can stick the end of that into the oil port on the bar, the little oil pole. Use that to clean it out. It'll tell you how your guide bar's going too. It's got little marks on it, a couple of millimeters. They're in millimeters, it's all metric. Drop that down into your bar groove. It'll tell you how much bar groove you have. Most manufacturers of bars will give you a manual. It'll tell you the minimum amount of chain groove depth you can have. If you do not have enough, it'll start, the drive links will start riding on the bottom of the bar, and it wears out the drive links pretty quickly. So another useful feature of this thing, for $10 or whatever it is for a little tiny pressed bit of steel, can do a lot for you.